I'm Matt Valley. Welcome to episode number 97 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insights pros that you trust. Today's guest is Angelo Pierro, my old friend and colleague. Years ago, Angelo was a partner at a company called Research Dynamics in the Toronto area. Great research company that was purchased in 2011 by GfK, which coincidentally was right about the time I joined GfK myself. So I was managing the global P&G business. A little bit of that work was in Canada. So I had a chance to head up there a couple of times, work on some things with the team there. Really awesome team. Great vibes on that team. And I still keep in touch with a few of them to this day, which is really cool. Angelo stayed on at GfK after the acquisition by GfK of several lines of businesses. And in 2021, he ventured off on his own, starting his own consultancy called Strategy by Insight, which is what he is doing now. So lots of good stuff there. But Angelo and I had a chance to reconnect in person at the IIEX conference in Austin just a few months ago, which was really amazing. And over some conference sessions and an awesome punk rock show, I learned of a really interesting side gig that Angelo has. And I thought, I don't think anybody on the podcast has done that yet. So here we are. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more. So welcome to the show, Angelo.
Thanks, Matt. The past month has been really great getting to reconnect from IIEX. It was nice to see you there, and I'm really excited to be on the show. I've been a fan of the show, and I'm not a big music aficionado like you and some of the guys we talked to, but I've been a fan of the show, seeing some people on it, and I was surprised that I qualified. I'm pretty excited about it as we talk about it. So I'm glad I'm going to be on the show and talk all things research and my little side project, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, super cool. Now, before we jump into it, I have to say that I'm wearing the merch of a band, hard to read. It's called Noogie. Now, I picked this up at Kick Butt Coffee, which was the show that Angelo and I and a few others attended together. And you say you're not a music guy, but you sure look like a music guy as you were kind of rocking out to Noogie, the bass player with like the 2-foot mohawk and everything. I mean, you were into it, so come on.
Yeah, everybody who knows me is getting a laugh out of hearing this, but I'm glad I went. It's the first punk rock show I've been to, and it's definitely an experience. Have a new appreciation for what those guys do. I mean, I got the athleticism and the energy they have on that stage. It's incredible. So I'm so glad that we set that up and I could make it.
Always a fun time. And last but not least, I have to mention Chris Connolly from the Logit Group, who's how we kind of reconnected in the first place. So I want to send a shout out to Chris for that. Great company, the Logit Group. So let's jump into it, Angelo. So first of all, how did you first become interested in research, get into the field, and tell us a little bit more about what your consultancy is doing now?
Yeah, sure. I think people from sort of the 90s and 80s and 90s always have that typical story that they kind of fell into research. Nowadays, more and more people are, thankfully, and it's nice to see, are choosing it or choosing data analytics and fields that touch it. So I think I sort of fell into it. The reason I say sort of is I was already academically doing work in public policy and economics and doing research, program research, which used a lot of the same tools that market researchers use, particularly survey analytics, 1990s style.
Yeah.
And just a friend of mine got a job at a company called the MPD Group. I got a summer job there and realized, oh, wow, like all these things I'm learning in school from a government policy side actually apply to the business world. And so I fell in love with it right away. So it ticked a lot of boxes for me, like, analytical, project management, having a problem and then wanting to solve it, satisfies that sort of personality trait I have. So that's how I fell into it. And then from MPD, I joined a small agency, became a partner with, you remember Joe, who was
Yes.
at GfK, Joe and Dominic. And we were three guys in an office in 1999. And by the time GfK came around, we were like 40 or so people, and had international work, and it was a great story. And so I think the GfK thing for me personally was great because I got an opportunity now to do a global role and
Yeah.
do some international work. So I kind of ticked the box on this entrepreneurship thing, and GfK was a fantastic experience. Lots of great people, really collaborative. It was interesting at the time because there was a growth period where there was a lot of integration and synergies.
Yeah.
And so learned a lot about business management in that experience as well, outside of new techniques. And then, as you mentioned, GfK, parts of GfK were absorbed into Ipsos in I guess 2018 or so, and I went along with that integration, and then about 2 years ago decided to do my own thing entrepreneurially, and now I'm running, as you said, Strategy by Insight, which is not entirely a research agency. Part of what I do is research, mostly as a bridge between internal marketing departments who don't have research functions,
Right.
and and rather than for the larger companies that have them. So I will play that role as an internal research agency for them. But the one area I spend a lot of time on, which I'm really excited about, is in the business planning, particularly for startups and
Right.
small businesses, and enjoying that, working with founders, entrepreneurs, have great business ideas. Some of it's in sectors I've never touched before, like biosciences, and it's pretty cool to like try to apply your business experience into a new sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool, cool, excellent. So I know that I know that you've got this interesting side gig. So
Yeah.
I'm chomping at the bit to hear more about it, because I sort of intentionally didn't ask you too much about it because I knew I wanted to talk to you about it on here. So so tell us about that whole thing.
Yeah. So I guess what got me on the show is the fact that I was talking to Matt about a movie that I've written. So I've written a screenplay along with a partner, and so the screenplay is written. It's called Good as Bread. I don't know
Oh,
if you guys can
nice.
see it. And it's a story I've had in my head for, believe it or not, about 20 years. And always had it. Some of the same similar people we know have always known about this story. And it's basically sort of not a life story, but a story that's based on life experiences that I had living and growing up with my grandfather, and
Okay.
his story of coming, as an immigrant to the country. Now we've adapted it to a play to a larger audience, and then we have adapted it to be sort of an American story. But the story behind it is the experiences I had, and a lot of it has to do with the lessons that a grandfather passes on to his grandson as they grow up. I lived with my grandparents quite a bit because both my parents worked, as typical immigrant family.
Right.
So my grandparents played caregiver, and so a lot of time spent with my grandfather. Playing checkers, playing cards. And he would pass on stories, and we'd go out to places, and he kind of passed on those life lessons, and they always stuck with me in a very important developmental type of way. And
Sure.
so where the story goes is, I mean, and I don't want to give away too much of the plot, but when I was 15, my grandfather passed away from ALS, and
Oh,
as some people may know, it's ALS is one of those diseases. It's not predictable. There's no hereditary facts to it. So in that experience, I was 15, so old enough to understand what's going on, but still young. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather as he was passing, and this sort of experience with him, it only came to me after the fact, like 5 or 6 years later, as I learned more about the disease. But is that, like, with this disease, your muscles deteriorate, but your mind still stays pretty active.
right.
And so basically what I started to wonder was, what was my grandfather thinking, right, during that whole experience, right? And what was he thinking with regard to me and our relationship? So this movie is kind of premised on the fact of my grandfather, what was going through his mind. I'm sort of telling the movie what was going through his mind about his grandson. and what he was hoping for his grandson, and the lessons he wanted to pass on to his grandson that he wasn't going to be able to pass on because he knew he was going to be dying, right? But with what I found with this experience was that it was emotional, but at the same time it was really inspiring. I worked with a screenwriter who had already written another screenplay before. We wrote together, and to be able to like lean on somebody that wasn't as emotionally attached to it as I was, and have him take different angles with it. I just finished product was just incredible.
Yeah. Wow. So it is finished, or
It's screenplay is it's all
screenplay's
here.
done.
And
Wow.
now we're in a process where we put together a budget, and we're looking for some preliminary financing. I mean, it's probably going to be an independent film. So the good news in Canada is that there's a lot of grants and support from agencies to help make a film. But learning this from the scratch, so it's kind of exciting and a little nervous too at the same time.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so you've had the story in your head for 20 years. At what point did you decide, you know what, I'm just gonna do this? What was the trigger?
It's a funny story. Yeah, so I mean, so obviously, now, I have, let's say, somewhat more time on my hands, although sometimes I feel like I'm busier than ever. But I'm trying to like enjoy and do things a little bit differently. And so one of the passion projects I always have was one of these things was on my list. But I always had this inertia to start. I can't tell you how many like Christmas gift books I got that said write your own screenplay, right? So
Yeah.
and so I had a coffee one day with a friend of mine, and he was, we're just talking, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I gotta go meet another buddy." And I said, "Oh, who are you going to meet?" He goes, and he said, "Massimo." And I said, "Oh, who's this guy? I never met him before." And he goes, "Oh, I've known him for like, 15 years or so." I go, "Well, what does Massimo do?" He goes, "Well, he's a screenwriter."
Ah.
I go, and I said, "You never told me about this guy, right?" And he's like, "I didn't think you needed one." So, this was about a year and a half ago, or a year ago. And yeah, I met with him, and we hit it off right away. And I gotta be honest, I was nervous. I didn't know where it was gonna go in terms of the story and how it was gonna come together. And I had all my notes, all my scribbles. I had like a journey map of the scenes and how they all worked. I had character profiles all written. But I think being able to entrust it to somebody, even though it was nervous, I think it was the right thing to do to help work on together with somebody who had that experience.
Yeah. Wow. That is so cool. I can't wait to follow the journey and eventually see the finished product. So super
Thank you.
exciting. Now, so this was an experience that was, obviously stamped into who you are at a young age. So I'm curious to know if there's anything that you took from maybe your grandfather that you later applied to your professional career, or maybe vice versa. Is there something you learned from, your career that you've applied to the process of the screenplay?
Yeah. So actually, no, I hadn't thought about your question that way, but I mean, there is the one thing that I think I got from my grandfather that he was very good at, and this is in the movie. This is one of the overarching themes and personality traits of the character in the movie is he was very much into he wasn't a businessman. He was a typical either construction laborer, he worked in retail, and so he had very simple day-to-day jobs. So the complexities of running a large business and all that was not necessarily what he went through. But what he was always very good at was looking at the big story, or looking at the whole situation, whether it had to do with family things or things happening, in my father's life. If something wasn't working out, he wouldn't just jump to conclusions. He'd look at the whole story.
Right.
And I actually think, in hindsight, now that I think about it, I probably got that from him, because I'm known to always looking at things from the other person's point of view.
Sure.
There's a reason why someone's reacting the way they're reacting, or way to something. So let's try to understand that before we sort of jump to conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
And in the story, one of the personality traits that really comes out is his ability to be a peacemaker. And the idea of being good as bread. Bread has historically been the symbol of, peace. Let's break bread. Let's end disputes. Let's end
Yeah.
disagreements, which is very much what is his personality. So it comes out a lot more in the movie and the story around the bread and the imagery, but that's kind of one of the underlying themes of the movie, and the idea of, not everything needs to be a battle, right? And not
Right.
everything needs to be and sometimes taking the higher road is the better road.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great.
So
So
so the other thing I was going to say in terms of um, like research, or what I learned in research to apply to the movie, was storytelling by far. In terms of understanding how to like speak to a person, an audience, putting it together. Obviously, working with Massimo, like he's got the creative element to make that happen.
yeah.
So, what I'll say as well is, despite the movie, having a seemingly sad undertone to it, we actually I think did a really good job of making it more of a dramedy. So there's a lot of comedic elements to the movie, which is a bit like my grandfather in terms of how he lived his life and how he related with people. So I'm kind of happy we did that, because back to my point, if I hadn't collaborated, which is another big common theme between research and film industry, if I hadn't collaborated, I think the story would have been a very literal, almost autobiographical story, which would have been fine. But I don't think it would have had the entertainment value that I'm hearing from people who have read it so far. They're like, wow, like, where'd you get all these ideas from, right?
Yeah.
It would have been more of like I said, a biography, right?
Yeah. That's really interesting, because I'm thinking in my head as you're saying that, to me it sounds very, very similar to like being in a band, right? So some people approach it as a collaborative affair. Like, I don't have all the ideas. I want all the ideas from other people too, in addition to mine, and it'll make it all better. And then some people are like, nope, I've got a vision. This is what it is. You're going to follow it. This is how I want you to play. This is how I want you to play this beat. And they're two different styles, right? Of course, I prefer the former easily, but they're two different ways to go. But clearly, you're also the more collaborative type, and I do think it makes it better.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be comfortable with it, and yeah, you're right. I mean, it's funny because in doing the project, the co-writer, he was very appreciative that I was open-minded to all these interesting angles we could take, right? And I said to him, I don't want to like dictate exactly how you got to do things. I want the creative element. I said, but as long as we have the themes are respected, the theme of the relationship between grandfather and grandson, the theme of how someone coping with a terminal illness is choosing to like, spend his time with his family, right? And so he was very true to the themes, but he was really good at like tweaking it so that there's an arc to the story, and the arc isn't what you would expect from what I probably told you so far. So that's why when someone reads it, they're like, they didn't see that coming, especially people who know me. They're like, you don't see this story coming out of this. So that's kind of been fun too, right?
Oh, that's amazing. I can't wait till it's eventually out. So good luck with that. That's awesome. So let's get back to research for a second, right? So you're now on your own. You're advising your clients in a lot of ways. So as you look forward to where research is headed, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so I think I mean, the obvious one, we've talked about it at length it was at the conference, is I don't even want to say AI, I'm just gonna say tech. I mean, like, whether it's artificial intelligence and changing the nature of survey data collection or data analytics,
Sure.
or new tools and sampling. Like, tech is changing everything. I think in the next 5 or 6 years is going to be a huge shift in the way traditional research has been done, and it's going to affect what I think is probably the more important factor, and that's human capital. I think human capital is probably the one thing we don't talk enough about. And I think it's at both ends of the spectrum. I think it's the people who are in research and they're going to still be there for another 10, 15 years, being able to adapt to the new technology. And to what extent do organizations empower them and facilitate that? Because there's almost this belief, I find, through stuff I've been seeing in consulting, is like, there's almost this belief in the larger companies that people will just learn it on their own or figure it out on their own. And, how do I apply AI? How do I talk about AI to my client intelligently, right? How do I apply? And it's not the case. I mean, it's, people have day jobs that they're working on, right? And so it's hard to like get that up to speed. And so that's kind of like that upper cohort of the employment pool. And they, I think organizations got doubled down on training them on what all this change that's happening now means in how they service clients or provide executives with answers, right? And then the other younger cohorts, the up and comings, the graduates, who are like super keen, and I got two in my household, and they do this stuff very easily. But what happens is they very quickly get into management positions, but don't have management expertise.
Right.
And we're in a people business, and it's a lot about management. And so there's got to be I think this is probably, I'm going to say equally, if not, and I can make the argument, more important than the tech implications is the people implications, and managing this big dichotomy between the tech savviness of the younger cohort and the management savviness of the older cohort.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. I haven't really thought about it that way. But you're right. I mean, people are behind all of this stuff. And you're also right that it's a people business, and you can't take that for granted. You can't run a team if you can't run it effectively, right? So,
a lot of the startups I'm working with, particularly ones in SaaS businesses, because they're not all in SaaS, the ones in SaaS businesses. I mean, there's initially when they launch something, there's a sense of like excitement that we're going to get people to use this product, and then quickly they realize that there's a big customer success component to making that product work that is sometimes underestimated in a DIY model.
Yeah.
And again, we take that for granted. It's like, okay, well, we'll just get some people and we'll get them to help them onboard. But that onboarding experience is so important. And again, it's a SaaS company, but it's the people part that makes or breaks that onboarding experience.
Yeah. Right? Yep. Definitely. Cool. All right. So this is a podcast, right? We all consume media. Very interested in your answer to this, considering your different places where you're spending your time and your effort. So just thinking about media in general, what do you turn to currently for, say, insight, inspiration, or enjoyment? Big, broad question.
Yeah. So I mean, sticking in the traditional realms of our audience, probably like I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell fan. I love his books. I love his. Sure. I find that they just resonate with me in terms of his thinking, his logic. I'm also a big fan of history books, whether it's biographical history or event history. So that's the other part. And I'm also a good fan of a good like mystery novel or a thriller type of book. Sometimes the media, I actually. I don't go anywhere, like I would say from a media perspective. I try to triangulate my information from different sources because I'm learning more and more, particularly with this pandemic, that even the sources you conventionally thought were authoritative, if that's the word, or official, like wow, right? And I mean, being in Canada, obviously we're on top of what's up here in terms of our media sources, but I'm constantly on the New York Times and the Wall Street and the CNN. Well, CNN obviously got its polarizing effect, but some of the more European journals as well. It's interesting to see what they say about North American context. So those are the kinds of things I turn to. And I'm a big sports fan, so obviously I'm all over those pages too, right? The Athletic and all those. So
cool. Any Any guilty pleasures on TV? Just curious.
Yeah.
Maybe not. You know,
I
maybe.
got I don't know if I'm gonna embarrass myself, but I got hooked on Vikings big time.
What's that?
Vikings.
Vikings. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know what it was about that show. It's just I think it was like it had a lot of the things that I like history part, the part about like that part of time where sort of was expansive and trying to
Yeah.
find out. Like I like that. That was the reason why I got into it. I do find myself gravitating to the ones that have some type of historical basis to historical drama.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? What are you into?
Good
Yeah,
question.
I know I was going to ask you that
Well, that just boomeranged right back in.
question.
I watch a lot of what I say to my wife, murder TV. On ID networks. The serial killer documentaries, all that kind of stuff. I
Okay.
watch a lot of that stuff. What else? I watch a lot of uh, Gordon Ramsay content. And I also watch a lot of Shark Tank. So
Well, I was just about to say Shark Tank.
yeah, as far as TV goes, I think those are
Yeah,
sort of my three main ones.
I'm hooked on Shark Tank. I like that show.
Yeah, I know it's awesome, and it's
You got a Canadian version of it too called Dragon's Den.
oh yeah, I think I've seen that before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them come from the Ontario area. So sometimes you're bound to see something in a show you might have run into or seen somewhere. So it's kind of cool.
oh yeah, 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 super cool, awesome. We've actually bought some products that we've seen Shark Tank, so it's funny to see all of that work out. So cool. All right, so we have not talked rock and roll yet. You can't escape it. Angelo,
Yeah,
you say you're not a big music guy, but everyone's got some music in their soul, right? so I have,
absolutely.
so I have to
Yeah.
know, right? So you're stranded on a desert island. You've got 3 records at your disposal to keep you company for the rest of your days. Besides Noogie, who I know is your newfound punk rock love, what are those 3 records that you would choose?
All right. Well, I don't know. Can you hear this? Tell me if you hear this. No, couldn't hear it.
Just a little bit, a little bit.
So I was trying to play the Beatles.
Oh, the Beatles. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I
Excellent.
love them. It's I don't know. I find the Beatles always a good pick me up band, and obviously the first song I probably have playing there is "Help I Need Somebody" because I'm stranded on an island. So
I love it. I love it.
yeah.
So which album do you have a particular album that you would choose from the Beatles?
No, I think I mean the album I usually play is the classics. There's one I have with all their classics on it.
Yeah.
I love Abbey Road. So there's a bunch of stuff. The Beatles is a big group that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
I guess the other one I was gonna say was the Eagles.
The Eagles. Okay.
And I thought you'd appreciate that one, so that's another one I'd probably bring with me.
Yeah, the Eagles' greatest hits is like the second most, the album with the second most sales of all time, something like that. Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hotel California, right? Everyone loves that song. Good barbecue song.
Yeah.
And then I think I mentioned this to you before. I probably bring you too, because just to kind of keep the energy going on the
Yeah.
island. And it's always a good classic album. Their hits.
Yep.
So my question to you is the same thing. What movies would you bring?
Ooh, I think I can answer that.
Okay, go for it.
Off the top of my head. I'd bring The Big Lebowski for sure.
Okay.
I would bring a movie called In Bruges, which is sort of a dark comedy based in Belgium. Really, really funny and weird, with an amazing soundtrack, and the cast is just incredible. And then the third one, I think I would go with Fargo. So very much a Coen Brothers guy for sure.
Yeah, that's a Minneapolis classic, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. That, you know, when Fargo came out, it was really funny because I remember my a lot of Minnesotans being upset, and my mom seeing some clips of the film, and she's like, "Oh, geez, we don't sound like that. Oh, no way."
Yeah.
Like,
And
so
meanwhile, you guys are all laughing, right?
obviously it was a little embellished, but it's pretty, it gets the right some of
I,
the
I thought you were going to say that the classic Tom Hanks movie Lost.
I just don't.
When you're on a stranded island, you could use all the help you can get, right?
It makes sense, but I
That's the
just
logical
don't like
part of
Tom
me thinking.
Hanks. One of those things. What can I say? All right, cool. Excellent, Angelo. This was an awesome conversation. Really loved hearing about your screenplay, and I'm very intrigued by it, and excited to see it come to life. It sounds really cool, and when it's based on your own experience, it's so meaningful. So, so that's great, and I'm glad that we've reconnected here recently, and I'm sure we will soon. So,
Well, thanks for having me on the show. And,
yeah, right on. So let's keep in touch. Let's talk soon, Angelo, and rock and roll.
well,